Hey there, I'm William Green. These are my green pets, and I wanted to share with you today. I received my order from Peruflora, so this is an orchid nursery in Peru, and I have ordered 5 flasks from them. 4 of the flasks that you have before you, these are all the same, and it's 5 varieties of Cattleya rex. So there's a Flamea, there's a Splash, there's an Ayacucho, Semi-Alba, and a Rosita, I believe. And I'm just super excited to have these. Now, usually when you think of flask, you might think of a hard container, but these are actually plastic bags that were sealed until I cut them open last night, and I've just kind of let them, exchange some air overnight. And today what I'm going to do is I'm going to get them out of the medium, out of their bags, rinse them off in water, and then put them into some community pots and get them growing. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so I cut the bag open all the way down to the level of where the little babies were, and then I just dumped the whole mass into the water. And this stuff, this agar or whatever the nutrient solution is, it's like jello. It's actually quite solid, kind of just jelly-like, and so it breaks off. You try to be gentle getting it off the plants, and this is what you're left with, little babies. And you can see the roots there. I try really hard not to break or damage any roots. Obviously, they are really sensitive at this stage to any kind of disturbance. So that's all the plants that were in one. And there's supposed to be 5 different varieties, 2 of each in each flask. I have no idea which one is which, but it is obvious that some of them are much bigger and some of them are much smaller. So I'm hoping that out of all of these, out of 4 flasks with 5 varieties of each flask, I'm hoping to end up with at least a couple of each variety. That would be fantastic. If I end up with more, that's great too. Alright, so all 4 of those flasks have been emptied out, and all the jello gook is in the bottom of the pan there, and then this is it. These are all the plants that came out of there. You can see they're pretty tightly packed together. But right now I'm just going to leave them the way they are. I'm not going to try to separate them. Their roots are very, very fragile right now. And I might leave them just like this for, several months. I'll spray them every day, probably a couple times a day with water. Let them harden off. The tent's really nice and humid in there, so I expect that I will see some crispiness on the edge of the leaves as they start to dry out from the lower levels of humidity. But as that's happening, I also expect new growth to start coming out. The really, really tiny ones, I'm going to be really, really careful with those. I just don't want to disturb anything too much. Every root that they have, I want them to keep. So that's basically what they're going to look like for the next few months, at least, as they acclimatize and adapt to their new situation. And then I might put them in. I'm actually thinking of eventually having them all in their own little clay pot, because I've got those really tiny ones. But for right now, if they're all stuck together in a mass, I'm just going to leave them like that so that they don't have to experience any more damage or trauma than they already have just by being deflasked. Alright, so here we are in the tent. These guys, this is the 2 variety packs, or the 4 variety packs. I'm just going to leave them just like this, and hopefully they're going to just keep growing like these Dowiana seedlings have. And I actually don't like how the Dowianas are sitting in that sphagnum. That's why I'm choosing to just leave these in the empty pot. And then this one is the Splash variety. And you can see these came a little bit damaged. I'm not exactly, it almost looks like it could be cold damage or something. I'm not sure, but some of those leaves have turned kind of brown or translucent. It's not good. Now the roots look fantastic on these guys, but that top growth is kind of worrisome. So be keeping an eye on these. This is actually a wooden pot, so this is all a big experiment. I mean, I expect them to do fine, but I am going to be giving them a lot of attention every day, probably spraying them at least twice a day. I do expect with the added light from the artificial light here, they're pretty you know, they're down on the bench, but they're still close enough to where you're gonna see a real color change in the leaves, I believe, because of all the light. But yeah, so here's my entire seedling collection now. Got the ones that I've had here since the fall, and then I've got a bunch of new ones that have just come in yesterday, a couple days ago, and then these guys from Peru. Wow. It doesn't look like much now, but there's going to be a lot of plants in here in the next few years. Alright, well that's the Peruflora order in, and it's exciting.